once you get it set up. We have a client that we helped them a little bit in this, and they did a lot of it on their own too. But we helped them put together a scenario where they have one base skin that they use in their portal's default folder, and then what they do is for each portal, they just make a variation of that skin using the portal.css. So they only have one skin to maintain across all their portals, and they use that in all their portals because they have a common layout, but they change out some colors, change out some graphics, and that's the kind of thing that especially if you're doing some kind of maybe a business where you sell websites for a really small amount of money, $300 or $400, then you don't have the budget to create a custom design or custom skin for each one. You can do something like that, get a little creative, and you're able to do that by using CSS in your layout. Obviously, if you've got all that stuff hard-coded into your HTML, you're not going to be able to change what the background image is, what the logo is, etc. once you get into it. Okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about this next. So the slides are going to go so you guys can relieve that. Okay. So let's first talk about CSS inheritance. Okay, we're going to talk about that real quick, especially for those in the room that are new to DotNetNuke. When you're doing your DotNetNuke skins, it's important to know the hierarchy of how the CSS that's already in DotNetNuke is going to be applied to your skin. Those of you that have designed or developed or delivered skins before have probably gone through the process where you do everything in your HTML and everything looks perfect, right? And then you put it into .NET and you got all these base CSS files and all these base CSS rules are being applied, and you spend the next 3 or 4 hours, maybe 3 or 4 days troubleshooting your design that you've made that worked perfectly in HTML, but now that you've got all the .NET CSS junk applied to it that it needs. I mean, .NET needs that to skin the control panel and all that as well, and it's base classes. But once you drop it in there, you've got all these surprises, right? So one just workflow task and something to help you while you're doing it, doing your thing is when you're developing your HTML, if you just drop in the 3 CSS that are going to be applied before the CSS that's on your skin, then that'll make it so that as you're designing and as you're developing your skin, you're going to find out these things before they're a surprise at the end. So that way you're not having to do any rework, and you're doing this as you go along, as you're building your HTML. Okay? So there are 3 that you've got to worry about that are applied before your skin CSS is applied. Okay? So first of all, there's default.css. Okay? Default.css, and I'm going to point these out in the file system as well. Default.css, if you take a look under skins underscore default, if you take a look in portals underscore default, you're going to see this default.css. Okay? So default.css, this is where all of the base CSS rules, all the base classes that are used throughout .NET are stored, right? So if you're having something that's showing up on your skin and you have no idea where it's coming from and why it's doing that, it's probably coming from default.css. But there are also some good things in there, right? So there's things you should be aware of. There are a couple of classes that you're going to run across. One is normal. And normal is the class that's going to be applied to basic content. That's applied to your site when there's no class, right? You've got the head class and the subhead class. These are kind of the class equivalents of H1 and H2. And then a couple other ones to be aware of, the command button class that for any link in .NET, they use the command button. Also skin object class. And these are all things that as you start to design your sites, you're going to find these classes that you need to override in every skin that you do because they're throughout .NET and they're going to be in the header. They're going to be you're going to have to override these to make your site look like your site, not look like .NET, right? So these are just some things to be aware of. After default.css is going to come skin.css, which is going to be your skin. So whenever you're creating a skin, so if we go take a look in here, my open for skin, you can see we've got this skin.css. When you're building your skin, skin.css is the class file, the CSS file, the style sheet file that is going to be for all skins in this folder. Okay, So all skins that are in this open source skin package or in this open source skin folder are going to use skin.css. Now, if you want to put some base stuff in skin.css, but you need to override that on a skin-by-skin basis, you can actually create a second CSS file that will be applied after that that is the same name as your skin. So for instance, if across, let's say I need to have 3 different layouts. I need to have a left column, right column, or a left rail and then right pane. And maybe I need to have a 3-column layout, and I need to have a full width layout, right? So when I need to have all these, I want to be able to have all my base stuff, what the logo looks like, what my fonts look like. I don't need to define that for all 3 of those skins. I just need to apply those. I need to define that in this base skin.css. But then if I want to have some specific classes or some specific styles for each of those other 3 skins that I was talking about, then I could create one with just the same name as the skin, and so it's of_skin.css, of_widgets.css. And by doing that, you can override and you can apply additional styling on a skin-by-skin basis, all right? And then after skin.css comes portal.css. And this is a style sheet that's created when your portal is created. And this will be in the root of your portal number. So for those that aren't familiar with what portals are, basically you're just going to look at portal 0 because you're just going to have a single installation or a single portal in your installation. And you've got this portal.css. Okay? A couple things about portal.css. One, you're going to want to look here and find more classes that are hiding and styling your installation in ways that you don't know why. Also, this is a good place if you want to do the kind of thing I was talking about earlier, where you have kind of base classes and then you just apply it on a portal-by-portal level. Another thing to point out with portal.css is that portal.css is available for admins to edit. Okay? So what does that mean? That means that they can actually go to the site settings, and they have a style sheet editor right here where they can update or they can edit and update the portal.css, and this is applied to every page in your website. So, for better or for worse, your admins do have access to this. So, for some of you that's a good thing, and for most of you that's a bad thing. Sorry.
So it's applied to all portals?
No. Portal.css is on a portal-by-portal basis. Default.css is applied to all portals. So if you need to have a class that's going to be applied to all portals in your installation, you put in default.css. Generally, I don't like to monkey with default.css and portal.css. I create my own style sheets and I don't touch .NETNuke. Because as soon as you start to get into modifying .NETNuke, then you get into a scenario where it's costly and it takes a lot of time to upgrade, and and then you get stuck on a version and new versions come out. You're not able to upgrade. So you always want to make sure you have a clear upgrade path. You do that by not modifying forward.
Where do container CSS and any module CSS fall in the hierarchy?
Great question. Module.css is going to come earlier in the process. Container comes at the end. So module.css, and I have to remember, actually, rather than trying to remember from memory, why don't we just do this the easy way and look at the page source, because whichever order they're in is the order that they're going to be applied. Okay, so first comes the default.css, then skin.css, then portal.css, and I don't see a module.css in any of these. Let me grab one real quick right now. There's a module.css. I'm going to tell you that.
And then the second part of that question is, under DNN5, can you use container CSS and then a container name CSS, same
you
as skin?
Yeah, you can do that for one. Yeah, same applies to them. Yeah. Container though is the last thing applied in that hierarchy. So that allows you to create something in your skin.css that you can override in the container basis too. But those are the kind of things that falls into that whole developer tricks thing, which you don't want to do. because then